The loader is one of the hardest working pieces of equipment we have in highway maintenance. And in many highway maintenance operations, it's the loader operator who keeps things going. Part 1 of this program on loader operations will cover routine, preventative maintenance, and startup procedures. Then we'll cover some of the loader controls you'll use every day and the shutdown procedures for the loader at the end of the day. Part 2 will cover maneuvering the loader and basic operation. Before we get started, I should point out that DOT has a lot of loaders, big and small, different makes and models, and we can't address all of the differences here. So it's always a good idea to read the operator's manual for the loader you'll be using. Study the maintenance requirements and learn the location and function of the various instruments and controls. Let's go over routine preventive maintenance. Start with a good overall look at the machine, checking for any signs of leaks or damage. Check for underinflated tires. Use a tire gauge if you're not sure. Underinflation wears out tires quickly and makes steering the loader that much harder. And check for loose or broken lug nuts while you're at it. Make sure everything is nice and tight. Look for leaks around the hydraulic hoses. Make sure the fittings are tight. If you see a puddle or any sign of a leak, get it fixed before you start the loader. Check your front tires, again for proper inflation and uneven tread wear and so on. And check for leaks around the hydraulic cylinders, which raise and lower the bucket. Check the hydraulic oil level on the sight glass on the tank. Take a good look through the engine compartment. Look for loose hoses and parts and leaks, anything that could lead to a breakdown. Check the engine oil every day. Keep it between the add and full marks on the dipstick. If the oil is foamy, gritty, or smells of fuel, don't start the engine until the problem has been diagnosed and corrected. Check the air filter restriction indicator. When it turns red, the filter should be cleaned or replaced. Bad fan belts and hoses can cause overheating too. Press on the belt. Check it for tightness. Look for cracks and signs of wear. Check the radiator hose. Make sure it's tight and in good shape. And check the coolant level. Keep it above the radiator core with fresh coolant. Then continue your inspections. Just walk around the loader and look for signs of obvious or potential trouble. If you find something wrong, take care of it yourself or report it to your supervisor. You're almost ready to start the loader. Climb into the cab using the foot and handholds, not by grabbing the steering wheel. Fasten your seatbelt. To start this loader, it has to be in neutral. Turn the key, and it should start right up. Let the engine warm up for 5 minutes. As the loader warms up, make sure the gauges on the instrument panel are working. You should get an oil pressure reading right away. If the gauge reads 0 or low oil pressure, that's a sign of a major problem. Shut off the engine and report it. Turn on the overhead beacon. Make sure it and all of your lights are working. And make sure you have a slow-moving vehicle sign mounted on the back of the machine. Check the color of the exhaust smoke after warming up. Thick black or white smoke indicates engine trouble. It should be almost colorless. Now, take the time for a little housekeeping. Clean the windshield and windows. You have to be able to see clearly on all sides. Keep the floorboard clean. You could easily slip on a greasy floorboard as you enter or leave the cab. Put the transmission in reverse and make sure the backup alarm is working. Then, drive ahead slowly and test your brakes. Most loaders are articulated. When you turn the front wheels, the whole front end of the machine swings around. Watch what happens to this barrel. The thing to remember is that even with the engine turned off, there may still be enough pressure in the hydraulic lines to move the front end slightly if someone turns the steering wheel. So before servicing the pivot area, lock the safety bar in place to prevent any chance of injury. There's one last thing to do once the walk-around is completed. Sign off on the daily check sheet that's in the loader. It helps make sure you haven't missed any safety items during your walk around, and it will keep a record of you keeping the equipment in good working order. Let's go over some of the loader controls. First, the boom and bucket controls. There are only 4 movements, so it's really pretty simple. You can raise the boom, roll the bucket back, roll the bucket forward, and lower the boom. In this loader, you'll control all of the movements with one lever. Pull back to raise the boom, and push it forward to lower it. That's a natural movement. Back to raise, forward to lower. Now when you move the lever to the left, the bucket will roll back. That's how you load it. Move the lever to the right, and the bucket will roll forward for dumping. There are 2 more bucket controls. First, the automatic leveler. Pull this lever all the way to the left and let it go. The bottom of the bucket will automatically return to a level position. That's a handy feature that you'll learn more about in Part 2. And there's also the bucket float control. Push the lever all the way forward, and the bucket will float along the surface you are working. Use this feature when you have to back drag or smooth an area. So, that's how you move the boom and bucket. Moving the loader is pretty simple. This loader has an automatic transmission. Lower gears are for working. Higher gears are for traveling at higher speeds on a smooth surface. Don't use them for working. Reverse is for, you guessed it, reversing, and neutral is for parking and starting. On some models, you can lock it in neutral with a latch on the column, so shifting is no problem. Just remember to come to a complete stop before you shift from reverse to forward or from forward to reverse. You're never in a big enough hurry to justify damaging the equipment. There's one more control you should be familiar with, the clutch disconnect. On this loader, it is the left pedal. When you depress it, all the engine's horsepower is directed to the hydraulic system, and in a lot of loader operations you'll want that extra power. You should also use the clutch disconnect when you're working on slopes. Whenever you hit the brakes in the loader, the transmission shifts into neutral. When you release the brakes, the loader will roll forward before the gear engages. Depressing the clutch disconnect eliminates that delayed reaction. Now, when you take your foot off the pedal, you won't roll forward. We've covered daily checks, startup procedures, and controls you'll use as a loader operator. Now, let's go over shutting down. Park on level ground. Put the transmission in neutral. Set the parking brake. Lower the bucket flat on the ground. Never shut the loader down immediately after it's been working under a full load. Let it idle for a few minutes to cool down gradually. After the cool down period, shut off the engine and cycle the steering wheel back and forth to relieve pressure in the hydraulic system. Only then it is safe to climb down into the pivot area. Check the transmission fluid. If it is low, add the correct type of fluid. Then do a quick walk-around inspection. Look for damage and report any operational problems to your supervisor. Try to keep the equipment clean. It'll last longer. Clean out the bucket too. The sooner you do it, the easier it'll be. We're nearly finished. Just a few more checks, and we'll be ready to go. First, the bucket and blade. These take a beating whenever you use the loader, so look for cracks or excessive wear. Replacing a worn blade is a lot cheaper than replacing the whole bucket. Then, check the grill. If it gets clogged up with trash or leaves, the engine may overheat. So inspect radiator screens daily and clean as necessary. And of course, make sure there's enough coolant. Check the pre-cleaner. That's where most of the dust gets trapped before it gets to the air filter. Dump out the dust and wipe out the bowl. Diesel engines need a lot of air, so it has to be clean. Mini loaders are equipped with turbochargers, which increases engine power. You should make sure the hoses leading to and from the turbocharger are in good shape. A worn hose could allow dirt to enter the engine and lead to a complete breakdown. That does it for engine checks. Now greasing. Several important items to keep in mind. Quite a few of our loaders are equipped with auto greasers. On your walk around, that needs to be checked not only to make sure it has a sufficient amount of grease, but to make sure it is working properly. Another thing to remember is that even if the loader you're going to run has an auto greaser, they do not grease every fitting on the loader. So make sure you check and see if all the fittings are getting greased, either by the auto greaser or by yourself. One thing you learn as a loader operator is that there is a lot of greasing to do. There'll be a lubrication chart on the loader or in the operator's manual. Refer to it to find the location of grease fittings and the recommended service intervals. Generally, you'll grease the parts that get the most wear. On loaders, that means the boom and bucket pivot points. Notice how he wipes the pivot clean before he adds pivot grease. That prevents dirty grease from entering back into the fitting. That concludes Part 1 of loader operation. In Part 2, we'll cover maneuvering the loader and some basic operations you'll need to learn. In many highway maintenance operations, it's the loader operator who keeps the job going. And although it takes a while to get a feel for the machine and how it works, you'll see there's a certain rhythm to the operation, a balance. The loader is a powerful machine. In the hands of a skilled operator, it can get a lot of work done in a day. The first thing to consider as a loader operator is bucket position. Keep the bucket about 14 inches off the ground and rolled back. Never travel with the bucket high in the air. Besides cutting down on your visibility, it makes the machine top-heavy. A good bump could tip the loader over. It could also get snagged on overhead power lines or tree limbs. Keep the bucket low for better control. And remember, the bucket can be used to carry many things, but not people. Never allow people in the bucket or anywhere else on the loader. To drive the loader forward, first fasten your seat belt. Then start the loader and raise the bucket to travel position. Release the parking brake and shift into gear. Remember, you want to use lower gears for working and higher gears for traveling. Backing up is pretty straightforward too. Just stop the loader, put it into reverse, and back up. But remember to never start moving backwards without first making sure that anyone or anything is in your way. It seems if something is going to show up, it's always behind you. Use your mirrors and look back before moving. Your rear view field of vision in a loader is excellent. Use it to prevent accidents and injuries. Steering a loader is quite a bit different than steering a car or truck. The whole front end swings around when you turn the wheel. The frame is articulated. It gives you a much tighter turning radius when maneuvering in close corners. But when you're driving in the yard or to the job site, give yourself plenty of room to go around obstacles. If your turn is too sharp, the rear end will hit whatever you're trying to get around. And remember, never let anyone in the pivot area when the engine's running. A couple of points to remember. Loaders don't have springs or shock absorbers. A bad bump, even a small one, can rock the loader enough to cause control problems. Slow down on rough terrain. And keep the bucket about 14 inches off the ground. If the loader gets to rocking and the bucket's too low, there's a chance it will dig into the ground and you'll lose control. Another thing to keep in mind are your doors. Never operate with the loader doors swinging open. For one thing, if you do, they'll get banged up in no time. Another important reason is the newer equipment is designed to run with all the doors and windows closed to keep the cabin pressurized to cut down on dust and dirt that might harm the electronic controls. Now let's take a look at basic operations, working with stockpiles and dump trucks. First, stockpiling. Moving a stockpile from one place to another is an excellent way to learn how to maneuver the loader and use the boom and bucket controls. Keep your work area as smooth as possible. A level area lets you move more quickly and improves your productivity. Clean up the area around the stockpile before, during, and after the operation. When you're working with stockpiles, it's important to keep the bucket down low and level to the ground as you go into the pile. If you go at the stockpile with the bucket rolled forward, you'll dig into the ground before you reach the pile. Besides making your area look like a battlefield, you'll contaminate the stockpile material. On the other hand, if you go up the pile with the bucket rolled back, the loader will push right up the side of the pile and compact the material underneath. The wheels will lose traction, and you won't get much material in the bucket either. So keep the bucket level with the blade just off the ground. Most loaders have an indicator somewhere on the boom that shows you when the bucket's level. And you'll also have the automatic leveler in the cab. Just pull it to the left and let go, and the bucket returns to the level position as you lower the boom. Go straight in at the bottom of the stockpile. Then lift the boom and roll the bucket back as you continue pushing in at the pile. Keep the bucket curled back as you back out of the pile. Go to the side of the new stockpile and curl the bucket forward to dump the material. Dump from as low a height as possible. That prevents scattering the material all over the area. Then, go back for more. During this or any operation, pay attention to how the machine is running. Keep an eye on the gauges. If anything goes out of the normal operating range, stop working and investigate. When you take a break, give the loader a quick walk-around inspection. Look for loose parts, leaks, or any sign of damage, and take care of it. You'll also have to work stockpiles of the salt we use for snow and ice control. Again, the procedure is the same, but sometimes the stockpile is indoors in the salt shed. That's different. The problem is clearance. The bucket can easily reach the rafters in the shed, so keep the entrance to the shed clear. If the material builds up in the doorway, it'll cut down your overhead clearance. Now, let's go over loading trucks. As I mentioned, working with a stockpile is good practice for other loader operations. It's hard to damage a pile of dirt. But loading trucks requires a little more practice and a lot more care. So, if loader operation is new to you, take it easy. Think about every move you make. Try to follow a V-shaped path. Our truck operators know to park at a 45-degree angle to the stockpile to make it easier for you to do just that. Following the V-shaped path means less travel distance and less turning. So you end up loading faster. And on a lot of jobs, that makes a big difference. But it's not a race, and we're never in so big a hurry that you have to drive sloppily. So to get the trucks loaded quickly, maneuver intelligently. Always keep an eye on the driver or other people around you. The driver should be in the cab or well away from the truck. A hard hat won't do any good when you're talking about a bucket full of heavy material. Make sure the bucket will clear the truck's side, but don't dump the material with the bucket too high. As in all loader operations, careful work and avoiding dangerous situations is the best way to get the job done. Safe operation of the loader can't be stressed enough. The loader is a powerful machine, and it can be dangerous. Read the manual, pay attention to the manufacturer's warnings, and know the capabilities and limitations of the machine. The loader can be used on any number of maintenance jobs. In fact, it probably is the most versatile piece of equipment we have. We have a wide amount of attachments for the loader. Regular buckets, buckets with different cutting edges, buckets for moving large amounts of snow, forks, V-plows, and snow blowers. That concludes our program on loader operations. These programs are meant to introduce you to the capabilities of the machine and your responsibilities for its daily maintenance. You'll become a good loader operator with practice, experience, and a willingness to learn.